Welcome to Try Not to Overthink It, where we explore the intricate landscape of mental health, well-being, and everyday life. I'm RJ.
Leo.
Join us as we dive into insightful conversations, share expert perspectives, and share personal stories that shed light on the various dimensions of mental wellness. Whether you're seeking guidance, inspiration, or a deeper understanding of the human mind, this podcast is your safe space to engage, learn, and navigate the journey to a happier, healthier self. If you're new to the channel, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification button so that you don't miss out on any future content. So today we are going to be speaking on the topic of faithfulness. So I thought it was an important idea, a great idea. I thought it was a good idea for us to discuss faithfulness. And we previously did an episode about infidelity, and as I was telling Khalil, you can't speak about one part of the lesson without having the other part of the lesson. So with infidelity, the other part of the lesson is being faithful. Because a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and ignorance sometimes leads you down the wrong path and doing things that you have no business doing. So I thought it was important for us to unpack this topic as well and kind of talk about the different facets of being faithful. So for me, I think that it's exceedingly important that you start off with the definition of things. You have to be able to define what faithfulness is. For a lot of us, we struggle with, especially in today's society, everyone has their own cobbled together definition of words. Right. When you get into a relationship with someone, one of the first things that you should be talking about, especially like once you guys have made it official, you guys go together real bad. This your boo thing, this your this your stank.
We go together. We go
together. When you guys have made it official, you guys decided to become a monogamous couple, you should be sitting down and defining what faithfulness means in the relationship. It's more than just physical loyalty, where I'm not going to, be entangling with anybody else. It includes emotional trust. It includes setting boundaries. Check out the mindfulness minutes Khalil did about boundaries in relationships. It includes honesty, and most importantly, it includes commitment. I think that without those key pieces, you will find that you will have a very hard time being faithful. Especially if you're not very intentional and very purposeful about what you are doing in the relationship and who you are trying to be in the relationship. But what do you think about that, Khalil?
Well, I'm glad that we were able to kind of talk about the other half that goes with infidelity, right? Because I've talked to a lot of couples, and, especially, I work private practice. I mostly have males, and they'll say, hey, I stepped out on a relationship, right? And now the trust is broken. And since this trust is broken, I'm seeing a lot of behaviors from my spouse, my significant other, or my partner that is looking like they're very insecure. It's looking like they're jealous. And even though, yes, the relationship suffered during that time of unfaithfulness, right? And the infidelity, it continues to suffer. And it actually causes some long-term repercussions or consequences for those behaviors, right? So now they're in a situation where it's like, I don't want to come home, because when I come home, I'm going to be asked 1,000,001 questions. When I go out, I'm always looked upon as being suspicious if I come in too late, or even if I come in too early, right? Because those are the consequences of being, not faithful in a relationship, right? We impact our partners when we are not fully committed, right? And so faithfulness, depending on how you're looking at it, when we start talking about being faithful, it's a commitment. You're saying, hey, I made a commitment to this person, and regardless, I have to keep this promise. It is very, very obvious that most people don't look at it that way. I'm in a relationship with somebody. Yes, we got married, and I know this is a covenant between me, the person, and God, right? But when we talk about you made a commitment, I think people think about it just like your phone, right? Oh, I made a commitment with Verizon. I'm gonna keep this sucker for 2 years. Then I'm gonna jump on T-Mobile when they get a better deal, right?
Yeah.
And you start thinking it's a lifelong commitment, man. You done made a deal with somebody for life.
Yeah.
This isn't something you did and you could just, shuck and jive your way out of it. This is not one of those situations. So when we do something like this and we're not looking at it as a lifelong commitment, and men and women see things differently. I remember as a kid, I'm talking about 15, 16, 17, and you're talking to females on the phone. You're doing that late night thing, falling asleep on the phone with each other, all bunned up, right? And a female is a lot different in their conception of time and reality. Because the females say, yeah, we gonna be together. Imagine what happened if we got married and have kids. I remember girls saying stuff like that at 16. You know what I mean? And in my mind, I was like, what? Because all I was thinking about is in the immediate, that instant gratification. How's it gonna be like if me and you lay up? That's about it. I ain't really marriage and kids. I wonder what our babies will look like. A lot of times the women bring that up. All right. And men, sometimes I think we struggle with that. And fast forward until when you get to a mature age, right? Sometimes men are still thinking about the immediate, that instant gratification, and the woman is looking for a lifetime commitment. And sometimes it's vice versa. I've met women who did not take that commitment serious, right? They said, hey, yeah, I cheated. And most of the time it was because their spouse or partner, did something that triggered that behavior. Most of the time it wasn't that they went out looking for another mate, right? Or looking for another person. It didn't start like that. Usually it was in reaction to something that was done to them. And yes, I know it's me and RJ on the podcast today, and I don't want to make this all about men, right? And what men do. This isn't one of them alpha dog programs, but we are going to tell you, these thoughts that we have as men, right? When it comes to that instant gratification, sometimes we don't see the long-term effects, right? So now, like I was saying, you're coming home to someone who is naturally going to be suspicious of everything you do because you broke that trust.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you were saying, right? Like one of the things that you have to be very cognizant of in being faithful is building the trust. You have to be very intentional about building trust and understanding that trust is a foundation for any strong relationship. There has to be, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, there has to be constant communication and, where you're staying tapped in with each other. Because again, it's very easy to fall into what's comfortable for you. You're used to this and fall into routines. Anybody who says they don't have routines is lying. We all have routines. How we get dressed in the morning, how we make a sandwich, how we get to work, the things that we do every day throughout the day. Those are all part of our daily routines, and we typically do and operate on the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
The problem for a lot of us couples, a lot of us sometimes start to take each other for granted. The longer you in a relationship, the more comfortable you are in the relationship, the more used to the person you are, you tend to start to fall into just being comfortable. So I feel comfortable saying these things. I feel comfortable doing these things. And that's where, as I said before, communication is very important. Where you and your significant other are continuously having conversations to maintain and to reinforce the trust. Because what you have to understand is things start to wear away as time progresses. Mountains wear away to nothing with enough time and enough, being exposed to the elements like water or wind. So if you think of trust like a mountain, with enough time and enough exposure to things, your trust can erode. Your trust can fall apart. That's where tapping in with your partner, making sure that the trust is reinforced. The trust is not falling apart. The trust is not being attacked. But also understanding that when you cause the trust to be broken. If you are going to maintain the relationship, understand that there is going to be more work that has to be done than just saying I'm sorry.
Right.
Because words without actions are worthless.
Worthless. Yeah. They don't
You
mean
got to
it.
be willing to put in the work to rebuild the trust, to show your partner that yes, I made some poor choices. Because I hear people say, "Oh, I made a mistake. I made a mistake." But I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my guy or my girl, to do something that violates the trust and the sanctity of the relationship. There were no mistakes. There were choices that were made, poor
Mm-hmm.
choices. You
Mm-hmm.
made choices. So if you say you were unfaithful with, doing something and entangling with somebody that was not your significant other, there were choices like being where that person was, being alone
Right.
with that person, taking clothes off, touching, kissing, laughing, spending time. There were choices that were being made, so there were no mistakes. There were concerted, purposeful, intentional decisions
Right.
that were being made. So that is where being an adult, and we talked, me and Nick shot an episode about this, accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Being willing to stand on business and being willing to own what you did, but also the repercussions and the consequences of what you did.
Right.
Because by being willing to own that and being willing to put forth the effort and put forth the work to rebuild what you damaged, again, that makes the trust stronger when you finally are able to reestablish it. Because now your partner recognizes that, hey, this relationship, it means something to this other person because they're willing to fix what they broke. Because
Right.
you can tell when someone truly values something based off of how well they take care of it, or
The
what
effort
they're
they put
willing to
into it.
do, the effort they're willing to
Yeah.
put into it when they've caused some damage to it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Instead of just casting it aside.
When you were talking about, you and Unique talking about accountability, one thing, I think people they're starting to see the difference, right? When we do these podcasts, a lot of times we get into a lot of the therapeutic approaches or the psychological approaches. Well, one of the differences when we do our podcast is we start talking about accountability. We start talking about being reliable, consistent, right? Owning up to what we do. It comes from life being a series of choices. And I know in therapy, one thing that I like to talk about, even when I talk about boundaries, right? We always have a choice, right? When I was, in my 20s, I remember making some really bad choices, right? There was nobody that sat there and tried to convince me, coerce me, or force me to make these decisions. These decisions were mine.
Mm-hmm.
When I refused to take accountability for the things that I did, all I did was impede my growth, right? I could not grow. I couldn't grow mentally, spiritually, emotionally. There was no growth in me when I refused to take accountability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being faithful to your partner, to your family, all right, to your job, being faithfulness at its core, right? It means that you're consistently trustworthy. That means you're a person of integrity, meaning when no one's around, I'm going to do the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
I'm gonna do the right thing.
I'm going to do the right thing, right? In these commitments, right? This promise that I've made to this person, right? If I see you unfaithful in something like, just not even be able to come to work on time, right? If I see you're unfaithful in even paying your bills, I start seeing your level of accountability. And I hate to be like that to
Man,
put
you
an
said something
account,
there.
huh?
You said something there.
Right. And RJ, you know where I'm going with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're unfaithful in small things, right?
You can't be
I'm gonna
trusted with
flip
big
the
things.
scripture, right? Man, I can't imagine what's going to happen with things
Yeah,
that are
God is not gonna bless you with a lot if you can't be a good steward
right,
over a little.
right. And I don't want to, be cliched and just throw out scripture. That's not what I do. I don't just fling swords, right? I want
Mm-hmm.
people to understand what we're saying. This takes practice. I wasn't always trustworthy, right? It
Yeah.
took me practice. I wasn't always dependable, reliable, consistent. It took practice to get there. But the first thing I do is be accountable. Life is a series of choices. I remember my mother saying, "Hey, you got to make better decisions. These aren't good decisions, right?
Yeah.
It's about decision making. I don't care how beautiful a person is, right? Because beauty is fleeting, right? And it definitely doesn't last long. For you all who don't understand about the earth and gravity in the atmosphere and stratosphere and all that, because I don't study all those things, but I do know gravity eventually starts to affect all of us, right? Our skin starts to sag, all right, it starts to wrinkle, right? There's different things depending on your genetic makeup and biology, right? You're not always going to look like that. I
Mhm.
don't look the same way I did at 20, right?
Yeah.
And so I think people forget about that. If that's all you're focused on is, I wonder what that is. I wonder what that feels like, right? And I'm willing to risk it all for that. That means that you obviously don't have any boundaries, and you also don't have good direction in life. Because if I have good direction in life, my choices and decisions are going to line up to get me to where I want to go. And if by me doing something that shows the opposite of loyalty and trustworthiness and doing something underhanded, I remember I used to smoke cigarettes, and a good mentor of mine was like, man, he saw me one day and I'm hiding a cigarette. I don't want people to see me smoking. He said, if you have to hide anything, right, that
You
means you
shouldn't be
probably
doing it.
shouldn't be doing it. Come on now, RJ.
A-
Go ahead and
abs-
speak on
absolutely. I mean, I think that, one of the things that you touched on about the choices, I think that when it comes to this particular topic, you have to understand and acknowledge temptations as well as boundaries.
Right.
Acknowledge that temptations exist. Nobody's blind.
Right.
Nobody lives in a bubble or a vacuum. But by setting clear and personal and clear personal and delineated boundaries in your relationship help you maintain being faithful. It helps you from doing things you have no business doing. When I know that, hey, I'm gonna be places where the yam's gonna be yamming, the cake's
Yeah.
gonna be caking. Listen, my best
Yeah.
option is to make sure that, hey, I'm not no place where I'm gonna be by myself with somebody. And so
Right.
for me as a man, I move with a certain way. As I make sure that there's at least an arm's distance between me and anybody at all times. If a person is too close to me, I will actually put my hand out and take a step back.
Yeah.
You're too close
That's
to
your
me.
boundary. That's your personal
And
boundary.
and and the reason I do that is because, again, we live in a day and age where people will say that you did something that you may or may not have done,
Right.
and I don't want to have to explain this ain't what it looked like. But then also, I make sure, because, again, I got eyes. I wear glasses, so I can see for sure. I can see my lens is so thick I can see the past, the present, and the future all at the same time. That's how good my vision is. So, I have eyes. But in understanding that I have eyes and understanding that the temptation to look and the temptation to gawk and to oogle is going to be there, a lot of times hey, I'll just get up and leave. I'll either get up and leave, or, I just try not to even put myself in that situation in the first place.
Right.
But
That's the first thing.
I,
Yeah. Trying not to put yourself in this situation in the
yes,
first place.
you have to recognize that, as Khalil was alluding to at the beginning of the episode, the short-term gratification is not going to outweigh the long-term benefits of being a person of integrity and values.
Mm.
So yes, this may feel good right now. It might look good, but everything that glitters ain't gold.
Right.
And so you do something that you can't take back. You damaged a relationship in a certain way, or you've done something that you now got to work to fix. And again, in the grand scheme of it, a lot of people, I guarantee you, if they, a lot of people that get caught being unfaithful, if you ask them, would you do it again? Knowing what you know now, would you do it again? A lot of them will tell you no.
Nope.
It wasn't worth it. Hell, if you ask people that, you take a straw poll of the people in prison,
Yeah,
for crimes that they committed. If you ask them, hey, if you knew then what you know now, and the consequence that we're going to come from these actions, would you still make the same choices? A lot of people tell you, no, I'd make different choices.
Look, and if you don't believe us, right? When I worked with RJ, I worked for one of the little inpatient programs who would receive people from the mental health division at certain prisons, right? We get people from some of the mental health prisons in Alabama, all the way down deep south, going towards Florida. And we get some of these people, right? And yes, they were mentally ill, but some of the correlation of them being mentally ill is probably how long they were locked up. But regardless, when I talked to these people, I was the case manager, and I had to try to find these people housing. I had to try to find these people wraparound services, right? When you talk to these people and you ask them about their experience, right? Because some of them were coming out of some rough institutions. You get what I'm saying? And when they came out, nobody out of the 6, 7 guys, women too, that I talked to, right, that I spent a lot of time with, nobody said that they made a good decision to put themselves in there. Nobody said it. Everybody said, man, I know I shouldn't have done that. I really should not have put my hands on that person. I shouldn't have taken that thing. Yeah, I was on drugs. And look, they said no one ever sat there and didn't take accountability for what they did, especially them guys who have been in there for 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
All of them. They said, yeah, I did it. It was stupid. Yeah, I was getting high, and all of them.
I was tripping.
I was tripping. I don't know why I did that. Nobody would want to repeat something like that. So, I say all that to say this. Hindsight's 2020. I can't go back and change those things. So that means every decision I make, I really have to take a good deep look at the pros, the cons, the benefits. I can't just jump out there anymore. I've put my life in jeopardy before. I'm not doing that. Especially, I don't care how beautiful the person is, right? It does not matter, especially because eventually, if I have some core values, if I have some commitments that I made with a partner, right? I have a particular religion, ideology, whatever it is, right? Because when we talk about being faithful, right, we need to start talking about it has some other obligations with it, right? That covenant we talked about earlier. If this is because everybody claims to be Christian in America, which just kind of blows my mind because we start talking about being Christian. I'm like, are we really all Christians, right? Because we don't understand what a covenant is. We don't understand because look at the divorce rate. 56%, 58% or something like that now. It's gone up. So are we really practicing our religion or faithfulness, right? And not to knock anybody. I'm just saying, when we talk about being faithful and making a commitment to someone, I have to question myself all the time. This is a lifelong commitment. Was I thinking clearly before I got married? Because I'm going to tell you, when it comes back to my mind of what I've done, right, in my life, I obviously was not thinking when you start looking at it in the long run, right? Because once you make that commitment to a person, that's supposed to be for the rest of your life.
Well, I think that it like we were speaking to about earlier. There are a lot of small incremental choices that cause you to go a certain way.
Right.
It's kind of like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. And so if you play any of the Star Wars games, you can either be a light side player or a dark side player.
Right.
And so typically what happens is there are some choices that you make, rather they be conversations, your choice to help someone versus let them die, give them some money versus let them starve, rescue them instead of, not rescuing them, that will dictate how the story progresses. So when you look at certain situations, because a lot of people, when they think being unfaithful, they think, just the physical infidelity versus understanding that there are other more damaging ways in which you can cheat and be unfaithful. You know, so like you were talking about boundaries in the mindfulness minutes. You were talking about just the different types of emotional boundaries and how you can set those emotional boundaries and stay true to those emotional, those certain boundaries. And one of the ones that you were talking about was emotional boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really understand that emotional affairs can be just as damaging, if not more damaging, than physical ones, because there's a connection there. There's a connection there that can sometimes be deeper than just we laid up together, we kissed, or there was some touching, because again, and this is where, as I said before, having conversations, loose boundaries turn into no boundaries, no boundaries turn into you doing things you ain't got no business doing.
Right.
So when you look at things like emotional boundaries, you're sharing deep, intimate parts of yourself with someone that is not your spouse. So you start to blur lines. So now you're putting this person in a category they should not be in, because this is not your significant other. And so for me, I've always been the type of person, if this is not a conversation or this is not some way that I can act in front of my significant other, I can't do it.
It should, something I should.
I got to get up and leave. If my significant other would feel some type of way if they were sitting right here watching me engage with this female, I know I'm in trouble.
Right.
So there's certain ways that I'm not gonna do. Like I'll never forget it. Right. One of my coworkers was like, "Hey, can I?" It's Christmas time. She's like, "Hey, can I have a hug?" "Hey, can I have a hug?" Da 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 da. And so I was like, she went to hug me, and I was like, I put my hand out. I picked up my phone. I was like, "Hey, my coworker is here. She want to give me a hug. How you feel about that?" Like I made sure that I ran it through. I ran it by, to make sure, because I'm not a person that I don't like people do a whole bunch of touching on me anyway. But my coworker, she went for that hug, and I went with that stiff arm. I gave her that Derrick Henry stiff arm. Get back. Hold on. I pulled out that phone.
Like, hey, look, no, you didn't give her the Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry be trucking people. He don't really stiff arm. He push you down.
Like, I was like, what we doing? She was like, "Oh, I'm just trying to give you a hug because it's Christmas." Hold on.
No.
FaceTime. Hey, my coworker, she over there. She want to give me a hug, because it's Christmas. Is that okay with you? Because again, like I said, what I never want to do is, one, I never want to put myself in a situation I got to explain this ain't what it looked like. But two, I'm definitely not trying to create bonds that are inappropriate, that blur lines. So I say that to say this. We sometimes confuse being, infidelity with just the physical piece.
Right.
You can be unfaithful emotionally. You can be unfaithful spiritually. You can be unfaithful, mentally and as well as physically. But the two that seem to appear to get people in trouble the most is the emotional and the physical.
Right.
Where we're sharing deep parts of ourselves with someone else that is not our significant other. We're having secret conversations to where now we got inside jokes. We got things that only you and I know about, and that's the wrong answer. Again, if this is not something that you would be comfortable doing in front of your significant other, or the roles were reversed, you would feel some type of way if they were doing it behind your back. How would you feel about it?
Right.
And that's where, as I said before, we have to have those thought processes of putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Because again, a lot of being unfaithful starts and stops with understanding that, hey, how would I feel? Because it goes into my next thought is respect and appreciation.
Yeah.
I have to respect the other person. I got to respect how they would feel, how the choices that I'm making, the actions that I'm doing impact them. Because when you're in a relationship, you're not in a relationship by yourself. You're not in a marriage by yourself. We make decisions. There's no I anymore. We collectively, and then when you start looking at, multiplying and having children and whatnot, you got to start looking at how your decisions are going to impact not only just your spouse, but also your children as well. because there are certain things, and I've alluded to this on previous episodes. There are certain things that I do because I watch my parents do them.
Right.
We all drive the same type of cars. Why? Because I see them drive it. We all drive Toyotas. Why? Because I seen them drive Toyotas.
Because they're dependable.
They're dependable. They're reliable. So
right.
I watch my parents only drive Toyotas. So we, as children, we only all drive Toyotas. So when you are looking at being faithful, you have to look at, respecting and appreciating your partner. Showing gratitude and respect for your partner reinforces the bonds that you guys have and reduces the chance of seeking attention from other people and elsewhere.
Yep.
When you feel appreciated, guess what? Because we talked about this in the infidelity episode.
Mm-hmm.
Typically, not all the time, but typically, the infidelity, the cheating, the urge, the inclination starts from a lack.
Yeah.
When you are being fulfilled, when you are being edified, and you are being, sustained in your present relationship, you tend to not be looking for attention somewhere else. You tend to not be looking, getting the ooglies, and getting the wanderlust someplace else. You tend to be focused on what's going on right here. And that's where it goes back to what I was saying earlier in the episode about staying tapped in with your partner. Because a lot of times what we tend to do is, as the relationship progresses, we've been together 10 years. I know everything there is to know about this person. We start getting into ruts. And so when we start getting into ruts, we start straying. We start growing apart.
You lose interest in that person, and even anything becomes more exciting.
Yeah, anything becomes
scrolling on Instagram.
Well, not even just anything, but something new becomes exciting.
Something new, right?
It's no different than, and it always blows my mind living here in Alabama. Every time they open a restaurant, that bad boy be packed. And it's like they opened an Olive Garden. Oh my God, the line is wrapped around the building. Y'all ain't never had spaghetti and chicken Alfredo before?
Right, you ain't never had Olive Garden.
I'm like, what? When they first opened Chipotle in Huntsville years ago, you would have to literally be standing outside. That's how long the line was. Like, people never had Chipotle before, or Cheddar's.
Right. A new Chick-fil-A opens up. It's wrapped around the corner.
I'm like, that makes no sense. But again, something new brings a certain level of excitement. Yeah. But that's where, again, staying tapped in with your partner, checking their pulse, occasionally make sure they're still alive. Because again, who a person was at 5 years ago is not who they are today. And that's where, as we matriculate in age, as we develop in life, as we pick up new things, we learn new skills, we become new people. And so when you are respectful and appreciating your partner, that means that you are not only respectful of their time, respectful of their energy, respectful of their efforts, and respectful for them sharing their life with you, but you're also appreciative of that. And so, the things that I'm appreciative of, I take good care of. I'm a good steward over. Because as Khalil was alluding to earlier, the things that, if you can't be a good steward over little, you're not going to be blessed with a lot. So, with my present relationship, I will always make sure that I am staying tapped in with my partner. I want to make sure that I'm appreciating their efforts, regardless of how big or how small that is. Because for some of us, we get caught up on things need to be done on a grand stage. They need to be grand gestures of love and admiration. It doesn't always have to be something big. Sometimes it could just be small, because that may be all the person has.
Right.
But just appreciating that, again, makes the person feel respected. It makes them feel heard. It makes them feel seen. And for some people, that's all that it takes.
That's all they need. Look, it even goes down to, especially for married couples, right? It even goes down to your children. I've talked to married couples, and their children are primary in the relationship, right? And you are supposed to love your kids, nurture your kids, right? But when kids get to a certain age, right? And even when kids are infants and toddlers and preteens and all that good stuff, right? Adolescents, right? Your marriage should still be primary. I had to reinforce this with a couple. yes, it's okay to be worried about kids, right? Because you want to make sure that they get the proper education, that, hey, if they're going to college, that they have a college fund. Hey, if they are not going to college and they want to follow another route, that you're encouraging them to take the right steps, and you want to teach certain things that are practical. But all of that does not take a back seat to your marriage. I know people hate hearing that. Well, no, my kids come first, ain't nothing. But no, because when those kids go out and find somebody else, because kids grow up, all right, and they find
Mm-hmm.
themselves their counterparts, right? They go get themselves partner, right? You ain't gonna be number one, right? So your faithfulness, all right, needs to still be with your partner. You can't come into a relationship and put your children first. It doesn't work like that. The person obviously is going to feel less than, they're going to feel ignored, right? And I've seen this. This is something that people don't like talking about. And what it is we enable these things to go on with our kids. I have a friend, his wife's still calling her children kids, and they in their 20s, late
Mm-hmm.
20s, some of them. They're not kids no more. You can't put them first before your relationship. All right. That you made this commitment with this person to be your spouse, right? That doesn't show that you have a commitment to them when you're constantly running behind adult children.
Yeah,
That gets
I mean,
people in trouble.
your children are meant to be in attaché
Hmm.
or an
Yes,
accoutrement. They
yes.
they you know they add to your
They
relationship.
add.
They do not supersede the relationship because they wouldn't even be here if there was no
If there
relationship in
was
the
no
first place.
relationship, thank you. People, I don't think people see that. And when you're having when I'm doing this counseling with two people, and all I keep hearing is your kids. I ain't never hearing about what you two. You know what your kids like more than what your partner like. That
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that I like the fact that you pointed out, like the sitting down in therapy, right? Because I think that it's very important that when it comes to this particular topic, that you got to be able to handle conflicts constructively.
Right.
Being able to sit down in therapy and be able to dissect, why are we here? How did we end up here? You know, is it that you're too involved with the kids and you're not giving me enough attention?
Yeah.
Is it that you're paying more attention to your job than me?
Yep.
Or hey, I was I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard. um the reason I bring that up is because, and it's not just because Khalil and I are therapists, that does play a part in it, but that's not only because of that.
But those are things
I
we've seen, we heard.
Those are things that we've seen and heard, but then most importantly, unresolved conflicts drive a wedge between partners.
Yep.
If we don't talk about it, we don't address it, it's gonna kill you, because the things that you don't address are going to address you. And
Hmm.
so when you have unresolved conflicts, you will see that partners start to grow apart because there's a wedge in between. There's a wall that's come up. And so it's important for couples to understand how they can resolve issues without jeopardizing their commitment and their relationship.
Right.
It's very important that couples understand that. But not even just that, but also understanding forgiveness and healing.
Hmm.
When the relationship has been compromised, what can we do? Is it worth saving?
Right.
And if it is worth saving, because this is a mistake that I've seen a lot of people make in therapy as well, where you forgive somebody, but then you still hold it over their head. If you forgive me or I forgive you, that means I don't get to throw it in your face whenever it's convenient for me. Now, that's one thing if you guys are talking about it and the conversation just kind of goes in that direction. But if, say, your significant other cheats on you, you can't, oh,
Hmm.
well, I did this because you cheated on me, or you're a cheater every time the conversation doesn't go the way that you want it to. The whole point of forgiveness, grace, mercy is to not is it's not for the other person, it's for you, it's to get that off of you. It's to free
Right.
you of the negativity and the weight of, something that you can't control. But it allows you to be able to start to heal. It allows your heart to heal. It allows your spirit and your soul to heal. And for a lot of us, what we tend to do is we tend to move into different spaces and different phases of our lives carrying old baggage. So when it comes to being able to recognize, all right, because again, I always talk about this, and I will, as a therapist, I will always be a big proponent of sitting. I'm a person, I want to talk it out. I want to talk it out. I want to see where I went wrong, because at the end of the day, I either win or I learn. I don't take no losses over here. So if myself and a person do not work out, I want to know where we went wrong, because guess what? I'm taking notes, so that when I at some point in time get into another relationship with someone else, I don't make the same mistakes.
See what you just said, RJ? All right. I need to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, I talked about it. Like when I started thinking about that marriage covenant, immediately I was like, man, this means forever, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I'm on my second marriage, for those who don't know, right? I didn't know that, right? I knew it. I'd have heard maybe the preacher throw it out there, but I wasn't going to church much, right? So I might have heard it, but cognizantly, I did not receive it, right? I didn't understand. They talk about forever. You're making a covenant with somebody for the rest of your life, right? Now that I'm in my second marriage, I fully understand it, right? But when I was in my first marriage, none of that stuff set in with me. That's why I said there's got to be some talk between people, like, hey, you're making a decision that affects you, your family, your children, your lineage. Yep, this affects everything that you're going to do going forward. This is how important this is, right? And making a decision that's ill-informed, and you get yourself in a situation where, you, your spouse, the children, everybody's going through hell, right? They're all going through, there's hell to pay when people break up, right?
Yeah.
And you start looking at yourself, you say, wow, why did I make this decision in the first place? It kind of goes back to like really being knowledgeable about these things that you're getting yourself into for the long run. This is a lifelong impacting decision you're going to make.
Absolutely.
It affects a lot. I mean, RJ, we've worked together in the past. There's been people we've worked with where, because their relationship was in peril, it affected what we did at work.
Yeah, because some people are not able to compartmentalize outside. Because I tell people all the time, who I am outside of work is not who I am inside of work. The two me's do not meet. When I clock out, I go back to being me.
Right.
And then when I clock in, who I am outside of work stays outside of work. I don't bring the two back and forth, because again, where you get in trouble with that is you end up bringing things from work home, and you end up bringing things from home to work. Yes. And so, as Khalil was alluding to, I could tell that a person's life was in chaos and calamity and catastrophe outside of work, based off of how they were responding to things at work, how they were acting at work, how they were carrying themselves at work, how they were dressed at work, how they were engaging with people at work, rather that be clients, patients, or other coworkers. Like you could just see that something wasn't okay. And I mean, the thing about it though is, as Khalil was alluding to, a lot of things start with understanding where you went wrong and not setting yourself up to continue to make the same choices.
Yeah.
Because as adults, and Khalil alluded to this earlier, and we talked about this in the accountability episode, by not taking accountability for your actions and the choices and the decisions you make, you are putting a ceiling over your ability to grow and to learn.
Right.
Because you are removing the option, because it takes a certain level of understanding, it takes a certain level of insight, it takes a certain level of humility to recognize I don't have all the answers. I screwed up, or I messed up over here, and I should have done and I could have done better over there. Yeah. And so when it's kind of like, playing Mario. I remember, being a kid playing Mario, and I would die. Okay, got killed doing this. Let me not do that the next time.
What was the worst sound when you died in Mario?
Yeah, like you would die and you would get hit by one of the Koopas or one of the
Yeah.
the mushroom dudes or something, and then you would die, and then you would start the level over again, and you had another opportunity to get it right,
Yeah.
to do the things correctly this time. Um, for a lot of us, again, we don't make the most of those opportunities in the lifetime of those opportunities, and we find ourselves just rinsing and repeating, doing the same things, and then being confused while we get the same exact results. I tell people all the time, I don't be confused. I know exactly why you got the
You
results
got
that you
that
got.
same result, right?
Because in order to have things you've never had, you got to be willing to do things you've never done. And
Mm,
so sometimes that means one of the best lessons I've gotten in life as an adult was knowing when to shut the hell up.
right.
If we spend twice as much time listening and learning and spend less time talking and reacting to everything and responding to everything, guess what? There are a lot of things that go a lot smoother.
Yeah.
Because there are things that you miss because you're talking. There are
Mm.
things that you didn't see because you're talking. There are things that you didn't receive because you're talking. Because if we're both talking at the same time, guess what we're both
Look,
not
somebody
doing?
ain't listening.
Somebody's not hearing or receiving something.
Hmm.
So going back to my point about communication earlier, there's a difference between listening and hearing somebody. Listening is just taking in what someone has to say, but you are looking to disprove what they're saying. You're looking to overtalk them. You're looking to get your point across. You're looking to devalue what they're saying. You're looking to pick apart what they're saying. Your feelings are involved in this conversation.
Hmm.
Whereas when you are hearing someone, you are listening to take it in, and you are listening to receive it and apply it.
Right.
I'm not looking to, my ego's not invested in it.
Right.
And for me, I remember I was dating this one young lady, right? We're having an argument. And I sat there and I let her talk for a good 45 minutes. And she's like, "You ain't got nothing to say?" I said, "Yeah, I have stuff to say." I said, "But I'm letting you talk." And she's like, "What you mean? Why you just letting me talk?" I said, "Because that's how a conversation
That's how
works.
conversations work.
That's how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to, you talk, I listen. I talk, you listen. If we're both talking at the same time, nobody's receiving anything."
Right.
And it blew her mind that I sat there for a good 45 minutes and didn't say anything. I wasn't on my phone because I'll put my phone down. I put my phone down, I turn and I'm looking at you. Sometimes I'll sit and do this because I
Right.
want you to see me, see you, look at you, receive what you're telling me. I'm giving you my complete and undivided attention. I turn the TV off. I put my phone down. I'm giving you my complete and undivided attention because, again, I am humble enough to know I don't have all the damn answers.
Right.
And because I prioritize the relationship over being right, I will do the things necessary. I will put forth the effort. I will put forth the work in order to ensure that the relationship is successful. Because this man right here, I don't believe in failing. I don't fail. I don't lose. All I do is win and all I do is learn. And so even if this relationship that we are presently in does not work, I will be a better version of myself in the next relationship, and the relationship after that, and the relationship after that, until I finally get it together.
Well, look, RJ,
Now,
you said something that really got me, right. Um, because if you're willing to listen to the other person, right, you're going to hear what your partner is saying, and you're also going to hear some other things that maybe they haven't said in the past, or haven't acted on, or haven't told you before. You're going to
well,
get to hear that
it's
person's real intentions in this
it's
relationship
not
if
even
you
that they've
listen.
never said it before. A lot of times people said shit before, but we wasn't listening
We wasn't
before.
listening. Yeah,
We heard they said it before, but
right,
we were so caught up, and that's where, as I said before, listening and hearing. When you listen, your feelings involved in that shit. So you done said
right.
something that hurt my feelings, done stung in my pride. So because my pride, my ego hurt, I'm mad. I'm big mad, and so I'm sitting like
Now
this,
my
and
feelings is involved.
my feelings is involved. My walls are up, my ears are closed, my eyes are shut. I'm not receiving nothing. So
Right. Defensive.
again, they may have been telling you this whole time, "I'm hungry," and
Right.
because you was in your feelings, you didn't go get them no goddamn on Chick-fil-A. So they sat over here and starved, and then next thing you know, Cooter Brown over here came skinning and grinning
And
with a
can't drop off
whole
that.
bucket of that Louisiana best from Popeyes, And guess what?
Boom.
Now a connection is formed over here because you weren't paying attention.
Right. And the craziest thing is if you listen and you listen to hear, like RJ said earlier, usually you can actually pull out of that conversation something that you can apply for your relationship in the future, right? My inability to hear what my partner is saying usually causes me problems in the long run, right? Because like you said, if they're hungry and I'm so defensive, as soon as they said something I didn't like, I got defensive and I didn't hear them.
Mm-hmm.
The first person that comes and just buys them a Happy Meal, right? That person is already looking better than me, right?
Damn right.
Because I didn't want to hear.
Because they fulfilled a need that you didn't.
That I didn't meet, right? I wasn't meeting a need. What I tell people is we can practice listening to our partners, right? And you don't have to be married for this. You could just be, this could be a girlfriend.
You could just be going together. Going together real bad.
Listen to what they're saying. I know sometimes people, depending on the person, right? People don't have the best communication skills. Some people, like RJ said, he listened to the girl complain for 45 minutes, right? You might listen to that person for 10 minutes straight. I don't care if it's high pitched, low pitched. I don't care if it's loud. I don't care if it's a whisper. Listen to that person and look and ask questions. So you mean this, right? Because I want to make sure that I get what you're saying, right? That's an active listening skill. Hey, I'm going to repeat what you said just to make sure I caught it, right? Listen to your partner. Just give them 10 minutes to listen. I promise. I tell couples this all the time. I promise if you listen, you'll start to notice that they're giving you the solution.
Mm-hmm. They're giving the answers to the test.
They're giving you the answers to the test. But because we get defensive, depending on how you brought up or what relationships, the baggage that, like RJ said, that baggage you brought in from the last relationship. So now I can't hear my partner. I don't want to hear nothing that man got to say. He reminded me of my dad, always talking that nonsense. Or I don't want to hear nothing that woman got to say. She reminded me of my ex, right? That's all baggage. That's all noise. If you can get through that noise and actually listen to each other, that's when we can stop going in circles, stop repeating the same arguments, and be able to look at the solutions because we give it to each other. Because I'm going to tell you what's going on with me. Because what I've learned in a relationship, I'm going to teach you how to treat me. Because as soon as you start talking that crazy mess or coming at me sideways,
I'm going to tell you what I'm going for and what I'm not going for.
Right. That triggers me. So when you start, I got to go.
Yeah.
We can't have this because that triggers me. You got to listen to one another.
But in order for that to occur, again, you have to be emotionally and mentally mature.
Right.
Because the thing about it though is, like I said, as Khalil alluded to, when you step into marriage is it's supposed to be. Theoretically in today's society, ain't. It's supposed to be a lifelong commitment before your friends, family, God, you take vows that should last, and it should last a lifetime. The lifetime, this is a lifetime guarantee. That's what a marriage is supposed to be. We gonna be together, and I'm going to do these things for the rest of we're gonna do these things together for the rest of our lives. Now, theoretically, it doesn't always happen that way in today's society, but it's supposed to be. What I was alluding to earlier about sitting and just receiving what the other person's telling you, regardless of how you feel about it. Mm-hmm. That comes with a certain level of maturity, because for me as an adult, I recognize that I could not always lead with my feelings, because feelings don't pay no bills. Feelings don't keep you warm at night. Feelings don't keep a roof over your head. Feelings don't put food in your belly. And feelings don't make you feel the way that you want to feel, when it's time to feel the way.
When it's time to feel something. But feelings will lie to you too.
Yeah, feelings will lie to you. Feelings will deceive you. Feelings will lead you astray. And so for me, a lot of times, like when I have to talk to somebody about something important, I will take my feelings out of it.
Right.
I will also, and I tell people this all the time. You're gonna be in a relationship with me. Understand? We're gonna talk. We are going to talk with each other. We're not going to talk at each other. We're not going to yell and scream. So I tell any woman listen to this podcast, you trying to be in a relationship with me, we're going to be in a healthy relationship. We're going to be in a healthy relationship where we talk our problems out. Because again, as I alluded to earlier, the problems that you don't resolve drive a wedge between you.
Right.
And so you will have girls, I've had girls attempt to want to talk to me and they just were not used to the talking.
Yeah,
They're
right.
used to the yelling. They're used to the chaos. And it's just like, oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, what you mean you see? I see why. Why you're, because that's what was one of the questions I asked people when we first started talking and getting to know each other. Why are you single?
Mm-hmm.
I ask people that, why are you single? And, everyone gives their own
little,
variation of the answer
perception
of why they're single. It's always the other person's
but it's
fault
the
and
dysfunction
But
that goes
it's
on.
exactly. It a lot of times, you can learn a lot from a person by how they answer that question. When you're asking them why are they single and they start blaming the other person when the other person was this and they did, that tells me dysfunction. That tells me chaos. That tells me, no accountability, because I guarantee you were not a Sunday stroll the entirety of the relationship. There were things that you did wrong, and there were things that you said wrong, and there were ways that you acted that were out of pocket, but just zero accountability and painting the other person. Nah, sis, we're going to do this date, but it ain't going to be a second or a third one.
Right.
Now, there have been times where you have people that will tell you the truth. Yeah, it was me. I said this, I handled it this way, I could have done this, I should have done that. That's going to get a second or third date, because that tells me there's some emotional maturity there. There's some mental maturity
growth
there.
out of it.
There's some growth and some elevation out of it. And so for me as a man and as a therapist, I love to sit down and have those conversations with people. But then I also, when I'm having therapy sessions with people and they have had, some infidelity or some breaking of the trust, I always tell them this: commitment is a choice. Being faithful and being consistent, as Khalil alluded to, and being committed is an ongoing, everyday decision. Your daily actions have to help reinforce your commitment and loyalty to the relationship. I was just having this conversation with my clients the other day when we were doing group, and I was telling them recovery is an everyday process. Most people think that once they made it through treatment, hey, I'm good. That's it. No, it is every single day that you wake up, you have to be intentional and you have to be purposeful about doing the right things. Because by not being intentional and not being purposeful about doing the right things, you are setting yourself up to find yourself doing things you ain't got no business doing. So when you are committed to your relationships, when that alarm clock wakes up, you are, you swing them legs out of the bed. You for me personally, I stop and I pray. Thank you, Lord, for allowing me to wake up and see another day. Because every day above ground is a blessing.
Right.
But then I also thank the Lord for the relationships that I have. Because again, the relationships that I have help shape me as a man. They help develop me as a man. The friendships that I have, I don't have many friends, but if as my friends, you help shape and help build me into being the best version of myself, because I don't believe that I operate in a vacuum by myself.
Right.
But I make the concerted and consistent choices to do the right things, which allow me to always be on the right side of things. And so when you look at your relationships and you apply that same logic to your relationships, when you are making the concerted and consistent choices to stay committed, to stay faithful, to stay loyal, to stay righteous, to operate with integrity and character, you don't find yourself even in situations you got to explain this ain't what it looked like. Baby, it wasn't me. She was touched. Right. She kissed me. I didn't kiss her. People already know, because again, you lead a certain way. People already know not to bring certain bullshit to you.
So one of the things that, before we leave, RJ, I did want to talk about when we talk about being faithful, right? Because it wasn't just in a marriage, or wasn't just in a relationship, a serious relationship, or anything like that. I kind of talked about it earlier. Being faithful, that's a part of your character. That's something you want to build in regardless of context, right? Of time, place, setting. This is something you want to carry with you, that, hey, I'm a consistent person. You know what I mean? I don't want to get too spiritual on it, but this is something that I wanted to work on. I had a lady, I was in a Bible study, I'll never forget it. Um, this is years ago, and she kept saying, every day I pray for the Lord to make me faithful, because
Yep.
God is always faithful, right? So
Yep.
it can't be reversed. It's God is always faithful. We're the unfaithful, right? And she said, that's my prayer, for me to be faithful. So I won't go away from my values. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because when I caught myself going away from my values, my morals, my convictions, I made the worst choices.
You find yourself in trouble.
You find yourself in trouble. And that faithfulness is way more than just, I know we talking about it in a relationship context, but it affects everything, everything in my life when I'm not maintaining my values, and I'm not being trustworthy, or I'm not operating with integrity, right? And I say all this because I've done that in my life, where, hey, I tell you one thing, do the other thing, right? Just to throw you off, right? I can't do that anymore. If I tell you something, my word is my bond. I want to come through. RJ said, "Hey man, we doing something at 8:30. You know what I'm saying? By 8:29, I need to be texting them. Hey, we still on?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Or sometime 8:35. But what I'm saying is, I know if I promise I'm doing something, I need to show up.
Yeah.
And I want you all to understand this, because it affects a lot of things. And I know in my relationship with my daughter, that's one thing I've been telling her. Man, if I can't do it, I tell her I can't do it.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? But if I'm gonna do it, she's starting to notice that my dad said he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it. I don't care what it is, because I want to be. I have to be faithful. This is something that I had to work on. I didn't come out the womb like this. Is something I worked on. And for those of you who are listening to this, man, we're saying this is something you work on, you build. And if you don't have it in your relationship now, this is something you guys can work on for your future. But people should want that for their own character. This is a character building episode, man. This isn't just about some therapeutic stuff. This is about character building. Because we suffer when we're not dependable. We suffer when we're not worthy of trust.
We suffer when we're not reliable. I mean, I agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, this episode, as I said before, we did the episode about being, about infidelity, and it was important that was half the lesson. How being unfaithful can get you in trouble. But then also we needed to have the other part of the lesson of being, faithful. Being unfaithful and then being faithful. I always believe in having, putting the full lesson out there. And that's why it was important for us to unpack this topic today. If you like what you heard and you like what you saw, I would greatly appreciate, Khalil, Unique would greatly appreciate. We would ask that you like, share, subscribe, hit those notification buttons, because we drop content every day. Rather that be mindfulness minutes or episodes. If you would prefer to listen to us, I don't know why you would, because we are some very good looking people. My mommy and daddy did a good job in making this.
Come look at us.
They did a good job to some slow jams. Most of us, we were created during some slow jams. So they did a good job. My mommy and daddy made this. So if you would prefer to listen to us instead of watch us, again, I don't know why you would. You're missing out by not watching us and instead choosing to listen to us. As a matter of fact, do both. Watch the episode and then make sure you listen to the episode. But if you prefer to listen to us, we can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Audible, pretty much anywhere you can get your audio files. We can be located. But also, please, in the link, there'll be linked down in the description, is the social media for the TikTok as well as for the Instagram, where we drop content there every day as well. But this is us signing out, and we will catch you guys next time. Peace.